Welcome to the Outlier Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Conlin, and today we're going to be focusing on a series of suspicious deaths and crimes that have rocked Brooklyn's nightlife scene. Could there be a dangerous pattern at play, or are these tragedies just coincidences? In the past year, 3 men have been found dead in Newtown Creek after nights out at local nightclubs, including the popular Brooklyn Mirage. Are these drownings purely accidental, or is something more sinister at work? Now let's set the scene for where this area is in Brooklyn and what exactly the Brooklyn Mirage is. So it's this electronic music venue in North Brooklyn, and yes, it's been pretty much the epicenter of these tragedies. So it houses several concert spaces, and for concert goers, it's a place to really enjoy EDM and party vibes. Now, as I mentioned, this is a really industrial, desolate area of North Brooklyn, and there really isn't great cell service. There aren't a lot of street lamps or street lights, and you have to walk quite a few blocks to be able to even see yellow cabs. Even to get your Uber, you have to walk a few blocks. And I actually emailed the city council person in the area at the beginning of the summer to see if it was a possibility of them adding more street lamps just for safety purposes. I didn't hear back, but I do know that things were being done and steps were being taken based on a few news articles that I read. Now, I have a girlfriend that she's a lot younger than me, but she has been to the Brooklyn Mirage quite a few times. So I had her just record for me a description of the area and her experience in getting cabs and just getting out of there.
The area around the Mirage is very desolate, industrial, not a lot of street lighting. Unfortunately, the L train is a bit of a walk. I don't think anyone would feel completely safe walking around, or at least a lot of women would be on guard. Unfortunately, up until this summer, getting a rideshare was extremely difficult. The cell phone service was spotty. There were price hikes specifically to that venue. And even if ordering a car, finding your car was extremely difficult. This would somewhat force people to walk a few blocks away and call rides or just opt to taking public transport.
Yeah, so this place sounds like a place where if you are a young woman, you would not want to leave alone. You would want to leave with a group of friends. However, what's so perplexing about this is that the victims that we're going to be discussing today are all men. Let's go back to last summer, July of 2023. 2 men, both 27 years old, were found dead in Newtown Creek, which is a really disgusting waterway about 30 minutes from the venue. And when I say Newtown Creek is disgusting, I mean, I have read reports and spoken to people that have been around that area, and this is a part of the East River, Newtown Creek, but there is a lot of waste in there, and it smells really bad, especially in the summer when it's very hot. So take that for what it is. The first victim was a psychologist, Carl Clemente, and I believe I stated that we went back to July of 2023. Well, Carl was actually retrieved from Newtown Creek on June 16th of 2023. He had actually been turned away from the Brooklyn Mirage nightclub that night, but I will get into that. And then a month later, John Kastick, a Goldman Sachs analyst, was found in the same waterway after attending a concert at the Mirage. And then most recently, a few months ago, July of 2024, the body of a 30-year-old man named Damani Alexander washed up in the same area following a night at the Knockdown Center, which is about 5 minutes away from the Mirage. It's another club. But let's start with the case of Carl Clemente. So Carl was supposed to attend a show at the Brooklyn Mirage, but security turned him away at the door. And according to his father, Carl had been drinking, and that pretty much explains why he was denied entry. He appeared to be physically intoxicated. But after leaving the venue, security footage shows him walking towards a nearby gas station. And what happens next is very unclear, because at one point, security footage actually shows Carl running towards a lumber yard, like sprinting. I mean, I know he was intoxicated, but why would he sprint? Was he running from someone or something? Or was this just Carl being in his own head, being drunk? Then his wallet was actually found at the nearby lumber yard. What? That makes no sense. Now, his father was left asking the same haunting question we all have. Why was he running and what was he running from? And his death was ruled an accidental drowning. Then, just a month later, another body of a young man had surfaced. And this time, it was John Castick. He worked on Wall Street and he had attended a concert at the Brooklyn Mirage on July 28th. Now, security footage shows him leaving the venue just after 2:30 a.m., walking alone, completely fine. He did not seem drunk. He was not stumbling. And security footage showed him calmly getting pizza at a food truck as well. That's zero signs of distress, zero signs of intoxication. And then his phone actually pinged by the Metropolitan Avenue Bridge, which leads to Newtown Creek. But by August 1st, John was missing and his body was found in the creek. And strangely, his wallet, phone, and keys were still on him, but he was shirtless. Now, John's father at first believed that his son may have been impaired in some way. He saw the camera footage. John wasn't drunk. Now, I don't have information if a toxicology report was performed during the autopsy, but John's father thought, well, he has a peanut allergy, so maybe he had some kind of allergic reaction to something he ate, but that wasn't the case per certain reports. Now, this autopsy for John, at first it was undetermined, but then it was later determined as an accidental drowning due to certain reports. Now, again, some things are very unclear because the autopsy reports for both men are not available. And there are also certain reports that claim that law enforcement didn't take Castick's father seriously because he was a sex offender, but that doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, it's just the whole thing is incredibly odd. And the fact that John's shirt was off, some people think that's suspicious, but shirts can come off and clothing articles can come off when you're in water and submerged in water and there's the current and rocks and whatever. So yeah, I find those two deaths to be incredibly suspicious. I mean, especially the fact that Carl was running and also the fact that John seemed completely fine. And then the next minute, he winds up dead in Newtown Creek. And remember what I said, this is not a creek that is pretty to look at, that is a tourist attraction. It's disgusting. It's full of waste. Now, there was one more thing that happened that summer, the summer of 2023. It didn't result in a murder, but a very bizarre kidnapping. Dr. Michael Batista is a 32-year-old ophthalmologist and cataract surgeon from Norwalk, Connecticut. Now, what began as a regular night out for him took a very terrifying and weird turn when Batista was leaving the club and was kidnapped by two men posing as taxi drivers. And this is just one of the weirdest things. I mean, this whole thing. So these events took place in the early hours of July 21st, 2023, after Dr. Batista had spent the night at the Brooklyn Mirage. He was drinking, but he was fine. And as the sun began to rise, he hailed what he believed to be a taxi, a legitimate taxi, to take him back to where his car was parked. However, this quote-unquote taxi wasn't a legitimate ride. And what followed for the next few hours was a total nightmare. Now, the doctor was driven to a location by the driver and an accomplice who were later identified as Anthony E. Benjamin and Stephen Daly. Now, they took him to an ATM, forced him to get cash. I mean, then they made him go to a strip club and spend tons of money there. They went into another ATM to get more money, went on a shopping spree. I mean, it was crazy. And they had made threats to Batista. They were referencing body bags and bullets, and they threatened to kill him if he escaped. Now, Batista was thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And since he was a doctor, he decided to leverage his job. He told them that he was on call that weekend and he had to get back to the hospital in Connecticut. And he said and convinced these guys that his absence would really raise alarms and he had to go to work. So when these two men decided they had drained Dr. Batista of all of his money, they drove him back to the hospital and dropped him off. So once he was there, he obviously ran out and then alerted hospital security, and they called local authorities, and the police showed up, and he told them about his situation. And they were able to find both Benjamin and Daly and arrest them and charge them with kidnapping, conspiracy, and some other related offenses. But it was super weird. Despite the severity of these charges, both men were released very quickly without having to post bail pending their court dates. And then when it came time for the court date, Benjamin didn't even show up. He had allegedly provided false contact information, including an old address or an incorrect phone number, which made tracking him really difficult. And after that, what was even weirder was that the charges were dropped by the DA, and they cited that Dr. Batista stopped cooperating, so they really had no choice but to drop the charges if the victim wasn't going to cooperate. So yeah, these guys are still on the street, which is absolutely terrifying. Now, there is no clear evidence linking this kidnapping to the deaths of the other young men who were found in Newtown Creek after leaving the Mirage, but this incident raises significant concerns about the safety of that area, particularly in the early morning hours when unlicensed taxis and predators are clearly taking advantage of unsuspecting people leaving the nightclub. Now, let's go to a year later. We have the case of Damani Alexander. Damani was a 30-year-old from Brooklyn, and he attended a party at the Knockdown Center, which I mentioned was another popular venue by the Mirage about 5 minutes away. Now, like Carl and John, his body was found in Newtown Creek, eerily close to where they pulled Carl and John out. But what sets Damani's case apart is that before his death, he sent the scariest text to a friend. In those texts, he wrote, "I think dude's trying to kill me." He mentioned the Knockdown Center, which is where he was seen, and that men were waiting for him outside. Now, shortly after sending those texts, he stopped responding. His mother, Desiree Nicholson, is calling for justice, and she absolutely suspects foul play despite the NYPD stance that there is no evidence of criminality. Damani knew how to swim, she argued, so how could he have drowned? So now we have 3 men, 3 similar circumstances, and yet the police remain unconvinced that there's no foul play involved, but as the city councilman said, Robert Holden, he said, quote, "You have 1 or 2, yeah, but now you have 3. We're seeing an alarming pattern," end quote. Right. So what could be behind these mysterious deaths? You have 3 young, healthy men who all wind up dead in Newtown Creek. So what are we looking at here? An unfortunate coincidence? Or could something more sinister be lurking in the shadows of Brooklyn? And I understand that these deaths were a year apart, but Jeffrey Dahmer spent years between killings at first. So some online sleuths are speculating that these deaths could be connected to a serial killer targeting young men, and others are pointing to just the possibility of dangerous situations with unlicensed drivers or just shady after parties gone wrong because of substance abuse or just accidents. And the local community is not sitting around quietly. I mentioned that the city council person announced that they would be working with the city to address these safety concerns, and they want better lighting, more security, and crackdowns on unlicensed taxi drivers operating in the area. So they are working with local agencies to address these growing concerns and just the sense of unease from the constituents. So beyond the safety concerns, though, there are also some questions of accountability to the Brooklyn Mirage. They have come under scrutiny from the state liquor authorities for the history of drug-related incidents at the club. Since opening in 2016, at least 3 people have died of drug overdoses, and over 1,600 concert goers have been treated for intoxication. Now, I don't know how long that time span is with the 1,600 concert goers, but yeah, that's a thing. So despite these alarming figures, the Brooklyn Mirage makes a lot of money. They make a lot of money for Brooklyn, and that means they have some powerful allies, including Mayor Eric Adams, whose former chief of staff once served as the venue's attorney. So maybe politics are playing a role in keeping this venue open despite its troubled history. And also, when a young woman overdosed in 2017 at the club, they did not report it, and that was a huge violation. Now, as of now, the NYPD has not officially linked the deaths of Carl Clemente, John Kastick, or Damani Alexander to any foul play. Kastick and Clemente's death were ruled as accidental drownings, and Damani Alexander, as of right now, is undetermined. We are waiting on that autopsy report. But for the families left behind, the pain of not knowing exactly what happened is just excruciating for them. And I think people just want to know that the NYPD is looking into this. I mean, I understand that they don't want to scare New Yorkers and say, hey, there could be a serial killer. But it's also important that everyone stay vigilant and that the police, when there are coincidences like this, they do their jobs. I want to play a statement from my friend Tom Smith, who is a former NYPD detective and Medal of Valor Award recipient, and also the host of the Gold Shields podcast. He provided a comment on this case, as he is former law enforcement. So I'm going to play that right now.
It seems to be a pattern at this point that needs to be checked out even more. The similarities cannot be explained away. More surveillance footage needs to be examined, and evidence needs to be gathered in those areas. Backgrounds of all 3 men need to be checked out, as well as their social media platforms, to see if there's any link to all 3. There may be one individual that is the cause of this, or it might be a group. Nevertheless, these cases need to be reopened and examined even more.
So that's former NYPD saying, hey, you gotta look into this. This is all too weird. Coincidences, I don't really believe in them. And Tom and I may be doing a part 2 on this. We might actually head out to Newtown Creek to kind of investigate the area and see what we can find. So stay tuned. And yeah, we don't have the answers yet, but what I know is that something doesn't feel right. 3 young men gone too soon, all found in the same creek, just steps away from where they thought they were going to have a fun night, a regular night. Now, that's all I have for today. Again, I hope I can do a part 2 on this. I'm really going to try to get there. I think it's only 45 minutes from where I live, so that shouldn't be too difficult. But if you have any information about these cases, we urge you to contact the NYPD. I just hope that for the families of Carl, John, and Damani, they get the answers that they deserve. So until next time, stay safe and stay vigilant. I'm Lauren Conlin. Thanks for listening.